What's up guys, this is Wences. Welcome back to my channel where we talk about personal development for INFJs and how to create an epic life on your terms. Today we're talking about when predictability is poison for INFJs. We all know that INFJs live in the future, but more than that, we create the future. And we are always looking for something that is unknown. If everything is already planned out, if you already know what's going to happen, positive or negatively, you will see that subconsciously we will create some drama even in order to create something new, something unexpected, something where we don't know what's going to happen and how. So this can be a huge point in the new year, and I really want to hone in on this. Before we get started, I want to remind you, if you want to take the next step in creating your INFJ Epic Life, then definitely check out the INFJ Epic Life Masterclass. We have around a month, I think, maybe even less than that, until the final sale ends. So you find all the information below. So let's back up here for a minute. Why is this even a topic? So I have actually watched a lot of videos on this topic about how our brain and our mind works, not just for INFJs, but as humans. And in general, we need something unknown. You remember when you were a child or you were a teenager, how excited all of us were to go to a new event. I remember when I first started going dancing, for example, every single time it was exciting. And I had butterflies in my stomach and I couldn't wait for that day to come. Fast forward a couple of years, I really didn't care because I knew exactly what's going to happen. I knew what kind of people I'll meet. I knew that, what kind of experience I'm going to have through that. And this thing goes for absolutely everything in our life. So if you have, for example, a job where you even know, okay, staying in this company, yes, I'll make some progress through the years. After 2 years, I'll have my promotion that I'm entitled to. You know that you're going to live at the same place you're living now. If you have all of those aspects where you know exactly what's going to happen, and remember, this is even a point of, things are going positively or negatively, we will go out of our way to create something that's unpredictable because we want to create the future. That is particularly important for INFJs. And I have made the experience, and not just in my life, but through working with my clients, and we've had situations in the bootcamp as well, is if you have that situation, you will go out of your way to be addicted to things that are maybe not even good for you because drama makes us feel alive. Adrenaline makes us feel alive, and it's better to even suffer than to not feel anything. And I remember these were my biggest fears, and for most people they are, and for us INFJs, as I said, it's like tenfold all of that because we do live in the future. So imagine every kind of drama you would have in your life if you would cut that out. So if you say, I'm not going to talk to that person anymore because every single time we get into an argument, or that person doesn't believe that I'm somebody good, or whatever it is, or you say, okay, I'm not going to embark in any kind of discussion, like all those things that bring drama to your life, most of us will not just be able to cut that out because the alternative is a boring life. And boring lives are actually even causing us way more depression than drama ever could. That's why if you look at all those spectrums of abundance, of personal happiness, you always have on the bottom things like being numbed out and completely not caring. And then you have things like anger. Because if you are angry, like even psychologists will tell you this, if you're angry, there's still some kind of emotion. There's still some liveliness in you. And if we don't even have that, we would go one layer below, which is that numb out part. And consciously or subconsciously, we won't want that. So at the same time, the way our society is built up, we don't want to take risks in creating like a completely different life. So all of those dramas, all of those unpredictable things, they come out in situations which aren't always the healthiest if we're not careful about it. So how does that look like? That looks like having volatile relationships. That looks like having a financial situation where you might be worried about how it's going to continue. That there's always like some kind of existential worry in the back of your mind, or you're putting yourself in situations that are not healthy for your well-being in all kinds of ways. So you cause yourself stress, you work too much, you put too much on your plate, or the stories are endless, but so many of us experience this. And the goal in all of this is to recognize that we do have this tendency of wanting unpredictability, that unpredictability is important. But here's the thing, and that's the most important one. We do need some kind of predictability predictability in order to feel safe. Because if we don't have that, we will always be reliving in stress. And the stress is keeping us stuck. It makes us feel alive on a superficial level. It makes us feel like something is happening, but our life is not moving forward and we're staying in survival mode. That's how most people operate. And for us INFJs, it will play out in this thing of, okay, how am I going to create my future? That's why so many of us have had some kind of fantasies of, getting together with a person that lives somewhere completely new where you could just be there and start fresh, like all of those things that, somewhere out there, there's my future. There's the thing that makes me happy. And we are willing to give everything up that's been going on in order to create that because our life right now is too predictable and we're looking for anything that will make us feel alive. Being willing to take into consideration pain, suffering, any kind of disadvantage for our well-being. And I remember it was Jordan Peterson, he said it like a couple of years ago. I watched one of his talks. He said at some point you have to have all of those opportunities you have in your life and you have to say, okay, I'm going to narrow them down. And this can be very painful because you say, okay, so I'm going to narrow it down. I'm going to say no to like 95% of the things that I could be doing because once I put it into this particular point, then I can expand. And I remember when I made that shift, it was very, very painful for me because it kind of made me feel like, okay, so I'm giving up actually feeling alive. It meant giving up people that were causing me drama, that weren't giving me security. That meant giving up fun, or how I always call it, those epic romantic thoughts that we had. That's how it felt at that moment. It felt the alternative would be a boring life where everything is predictable, everything is great, and then I would have to look from that point on. But didn't we just say that predictability in itself is poison? So how can this be the strategy that I'm suggesting? I'm suggesting it because we have to look for the unpredictable in a way that makes us feel like we're playing. Look back at how you felt when you were a child. And Dr. Joe Dispenza really talks about this a lot, that when we were children, we were excited about the next play date. We were excited about going on a school trip because we didn't know what was going to happen. But it wasn't about drama. It wasn't about existential crises. So when I was in that state, before I made that jump, I had, that job that looked great on paper, where after years I would make my promotions. Nobody would ever think of me that I don't have my life together. But I knew it's all planned out. There's no excitement there. There's nothing new happening. Everything how I had planned it was going to happen. So there was no reason of me to really think about this and create life. So how did I use that urge of mine, this INFJ urge of creating future realities? I did that, as I said, through unhealthy relationships, through living in situations where I wasn't really aware of my financial situation, and at the same time always feeling like, okay, something is missing. I need that extra kick. But the reality is, of course, nothing changed. Those things were happening in my mind. I was living in survival mode, nothing improved in real life. So the switch came when I recognized, okay, I gotta just rearrange those things. I have to have predictability in my relationships, in my financial situation, in what I feel stable in, so I feel secure. So when I go into those unpredictable things, I know that they're a game, that I can handle them. And that was when I decided, okay, I'm gonna go for my vocation. That's when I decided, okay, I'm going to combine it and at some point quit my job and do this full time. I build up a foundation, something that was secure for me, the things that are supposed to be the closest. And then I went for the thing where I don't know how it's going to turn out. And that is the one thing I can recommend to you on 1,000%, particularly for us INFJs. Think about it. You don't need to have a relationship where you don't know where you stand. You need stability. You need to know that that is somebody you have at your side. This just doesn't go for romantic relationships. This goes for your friends. This goes for the people you work with, whatever you have in your mind. Same thing goes for your financial situation. Don't be in a place where you're constantly on the verge of, am I going to make it or not? Those existential crises are keeping you from moving forward, because when you're in a state of survival, there is no room for creativity. There is no room for saying, okay, now I'm going to step into play. Now I'm going to get excited about something and I will not know how it will turn out. I'm I'm willing to take the risk, but it's still a risk that is manageable. It's a risk with boundaries, right? If I go and I do whatever I do here, yeah, what's the worst thing that could happen? Yeah, people will judge me. That's how it started. Now at some point you get, the stakes get bigger and bigger and you can handle it. But in the beginning, what was this channel for me? It was like, okay, I want to help people. I want to share my thoughts. And the worst thing that could happen is that somebody looks at me and laughs and doesn't like what I'm doing. This wouldn't have been a survival thing. This wouldn't have been something that would mess up my life. And that's why I had such a play approach with it. I was willing to tackle all of those inner blocks that were keeping me from growing. And it doesn't have to be YouTube, don't get me wrong, but we all have our passions. We all have those things that will get our life out of the ordinary, that will get our life into a position where we don't know what's going to happen. And we need that combination of healthy predictability to a point where things are okay, where we know we're safe. So we're not in this stress mode. We're not in this adrenaline mode of survival where we're not able to create. But at the same time, we have to tackle something where we do challenge ourselves, where we do get to in a position where we get comfortable being uncomfortable. I too have to challenge myself every single time when I do something new to get to a point of, okay, this doesn't feel comfortable, but I don't feel overwhelmed. You know how I always say we want to find the sweet spot of getting you outside of your comfort zone, but it doesn't overwhelm you. And that has to be something that you take on in your life. It has to be something where you feel like, okay, now I get to prove to myself what I can accomplish, what I can create that's out of the ordinary, something that hasn't existed yet, something that is not on the trajectory of what's going to happen. So even now, if I continue with the videos the way I do and I don't change anything, it grows. Things get better, but this isn't enough because this is a predictable pattern. And I will go out of my way to create some kind of unpredictability, maybe even in areas that are not healthy, if I'm not willing to challenge myself, if I'm not willing to go out of my way and create something new to challenge my beliefs about myself. That's where the magic happens. That's where you can change your life and create amazing results. It won't happen unless you recognize predictability can be poisonous. Predictability is meant to be there in the things where you feel safe. You don't need to be in survival mode. We're not being chased by tigers here anymore. We need to meditate, get to a place where everything is fine so we can then find areas in our life where we say, okay, here I'm going to be the warrior. Here I'm going to be the fighter. Here I'm going to dare for the next big thing. And it doesn't matter where you are in your life. If you're barely making it by and you don't know how to pay your rent next month, or if you're somebody who's making, a lot of money through your job, in both scenarios, you feel like, okay, something is missing. It doesn't matter where you're at. We need to create stability step by step and then take on something which challenges us to a new way of thinking, which allows us to get uncomfortable, which allows us to tap into our potential and to see how far we can take it. And no matter where you're at, you can take that step. So even if you're in a position where you say, I don't know how to pay my rent next month, well, why are you not just getting a job that will make sure that you can pay that bill, right? Most of us don't do this because then we feel like, okay, I'm settling. If I just take that job, whatever it is, just to make sure I can get by, it's like I'm giving up. Like, what kind of exciting life is that? I just have to settle for this mundane job. That's not the case. We're creating a foundation that gets you out of the survival mode so you can then additionally take on something where you can prove to yourself what is the next thing I can take on, which isn't in the trajectory of things that are going to happen if we just go with the flow. Finding the balance, finding the dance between those two can be so liberating and so exciting you wouldn't even believe it. Remember, you can definitely use the 5 pillars to an epic life for this. The posters for free if you haven't downloaded it yet. The information is below, and if you want to go really deep into this, then get the INFJ Epic Life Masterclass. All the information you find below. And if you want to watch another video now that is in alignment with today's topic, then watch the video on INFJs not tapping into their potential. Like always, guys, I wish you a wonderful day, a great week, and I talk to you next time. Bye.